Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest edition of Practical Show Tech webinar series. We're on this will be number 45 around backbone networks. Obviously, when all the we'll call it everybody kind of said, how can we do things remotely, right? And all of a sudden it's, hey, we have this thing called the internet, we should use that, right? And all of a sudden we see all these technologies start to emerge, and we're like, oh, we got to create a new solution for this, and we got to create a new solution for that, and oh my god, my picture doesn't look so good, and all these different things that are all about leveraging the internet, which is great. That's one of the neatest things. But when we started looking at things and we started talking about topics, Pete's like, hey, look at this backbone network idea. And like everything in our industry, word of mouth is still number one, right? On so many levels. Yes, advertising, top of mind, all those different slogans we're used to hearing. But when we talk about it, and as I was investigating myself, it brought back remembering when I was in high school, and I had this great idea. I was going to start a radio station. That was a while ago, and there was a lot of paperwork. And I'm pretty sure the FCC has not reduced the amount of paperwork. The Paperwork Reduction Act of 1967 or whatever, I'm not really sure there was any paperwork reduced there. But the dream of communicating with a broader audience, the idea that technology, and at the time it was wireless, but it wasn't the FM transmitter that really intrigued me. It was the ability to interact with people, I think, that really attracted me to that. And I got a face for radio. I'll be the first to admit that video cameras aren't always friendly to me. But this idea of what we hear out here now, the radio industry has been doing this for decades, right? And so that's one of the things that's really interesting to me about this topic today. And George is going to be sharing a lot of, not just about what the product does, but in some cases how he's personally taking this opportunity and how he's using these products, as well as the downtime to communicate with people around. I'm thinking of ways that we've become so focused on video pictures with audio. And I just read an article recently that was about everybody going, I'm tired of being on camera for all my meetings, right? Even to today, somebody sent me a note, said, hey, you want to do a video conference real quick about this? I'm like, we could just talk by phone too, right? And I didn't think about that at the time, but it's like, well, you know what? That's exactly what we could do. And the voice, right? What we can convey through that. So
correct.
Today is about that, right? And I will shut up now. I'm going to let Pete and Mac kind of talk about taking questions today and how that's going to work. I think the plan, Pete and Mac are going to be kind of that co-moderator. So go ahead and give them a walk down of what you're thinking. Mac's got a new speech. All right. People that aren't being specific, Mac is coming down hard on you people. I'm telling
you. Specific.
He is not putting up with anything anymore. So I'm going to pop off the screen and let you two fill in the audience, and throw it over to George when you're ready.
Okay. So I see mostly familiar names on the attendee list there. So you've probably all heard this spiel, and I haven't had a chance actually to record it into QLab or my instant replay. So I'm going to just speak it one more time. We're going to take questions. We're going to try to answer all the questions. If we don't get your specific question, we're going to try to get that topic. But when you ask questions, be specific about what you're asking about, because the questions may not be dealt with immediately in the timeline of George's presentation. So we need a specific question in order to know what you're referring to. And the same thing with comments. If you say, oh, that's great, I always do that. Note what what it was that's great that you always do, because we won't know what it is when it's out of time. But that said, get your questions in the question box in the pull down question menu in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will see them. Not all the attendees will see them. We will see them all, but the attendees there may be some of them will see them, but generally the attendees won't see your question or your comments, but we will see them, and we will get to the questions.
Excellent.
Pete?
Mac, that's great. I always do that.
Be specific, damn it.
So I met Backbone about maybe 4 or 5 NABs ago, and I was just walking through the, I guess it's Hall C, going back to the hotel in the audio area, basically right across the aisle from Telecast. And I saw them and I looked at them, and I said, I met a guy that I knew from years and years ago, Richard Cerney, who used to work for Telecast. And I said, what is Backbone? And it turns out it was exactly what I was looking for a friend who does a call-in radio show. She calls her guest on another line and talks to them. And right now she just records it. And but she misses the days of call-in radio. And the call-in radio aspect of this program is amazing. The fact that you can keep notes on every caller, and if that caller ever calls you again, their notes from the last time they ever called you pop up, so you can know that the guy's a
Troublemaker
or a troublemaker, and you can also have another person answering the calls and pre-interviewing them before they're put in the queue to go online. And they don't have to be in the same room. They can be across the country, your assistant and your live show. But it's pretty amazing. And just take a look at it. Thanks, George. Go for it.
All right. So I'll have to say I've been in radio my whole life. As a matter of fact, that's my dad, also a George Capalbo, and he worked for RKO. You probably know WFYR. You're in Chicago. He was the VP of engineering for that. So I basically grew up hanging around radio stations and essentially just kind of not knowing it, but absorbing the business, and then ended up getting into it. But he was big on the analog side, obviously. He created the first satellite network back in the 80s with RKO. But I kind of took it and turned it all inside out when the internet happened. And he was one of my advisors when I was getting started in this, which is some years ago. And so what I like to say is we're doing radio, we're creating the illusion of radio, and we're also taking technology and turning radio inside out. What does that mean? That means that you can do things you do now with terrestrial radio, but do it internet-based. And you can also create radio stations that are just internet. So Kelly, you were talking about you couldn't get the FCC to approve your radio station. Well, internet, there's plenty of tower space. It's very easy to set up and very easy to do. So what does Backbone do? And so I have a set of slides. This is basically broadcast technologies. And kind of the main thing I'd like to say, and forget about the bits and bytes and all of that, sort of the thing that what makes us different from anybody else. Okay, so customarily in radio, all your gear that does your automation and all your calls and all that are all sitting in a radio studio, and you send that out to a transmitter. And that works very well, obviously, for many years, but you need that brick and mortar space. You have to have someone maintaining it 24 hours a day on site. You need to, basically be there physically. And so what Backbone does is we just kind of flip that a little bit, and we still have that studio part, which is somewhere, could be anywhere, could be right here, could be in the room you're in right now, or it could be at that brick and mortar station. And we transfer all of that automation, all of that, the thing that keeps your radio station on the air, the part that does your phone calls, where all the lines would come into your studio, they now come into that internet hosted site, and all that lives online, which means you can go anywhere. So, well, obviously, in today's world, there's a lot going on where you can't be at that brick and mortar situation, at least for the moment. And it turns out that our product line is actually pretty good for that. So what do we have for products? So we started out doing radio. We have a radio product, we have a talk product, and then we also have a new product that does distribution. And so for the radio, essentially, there's automation. And again, I like to say that lives in the cloud, but it really is a real computer. It's not a virtual machine. It's a physical computer in a data center. There are people there 24 hours a day to watch it if for some reason it goes down and brings it up. And we have our own monitoring and we know what's going on. So we handle that for you. We're essentially your engineering staff, and we keep you on the air. So the second part of it is broadcast anywhere. So we could actually bring up a piece of software right here and go live on a station and be broadcasting to the world. And then, of course, as part of that, we have all sorts of software and additional things. You can use your own products to do live assist, to play your breaks, to do your stop sets, to play your music, to do stingers, etc. We have all that as part of the suite of products you get when you buy into our radio product. And but it can all just sit there and run autonomously. So you can just load things into our cloud automation and let it run and just kind of update it every once in a while. It'll do random mixes of things. It does in radio for music, this thing, the broadcast complement, which is so many songs played by the same artist in a few hour period, etc. We do all that in software. You don't have to run a separate traffic system to go generate all that. But at the same time, you can go live and do whatever you want. You can control all that. So, and that turns out to work really well for doing just spoken things as well as music. We have the ability to play the newest show of a category in a radio automation. So that's great for repeating a podcast, etc. So a number of our radio customers are people who are hosts in their region that are well known, and they're no longer at their terrestrial station, but they still have a following and they want to get themselves on the air again. And some examples of that is a guy in Boston named Glenn Ordway. He did a thing called The Big Show on the big sports talker in Boston, WEI, for many years. And he left that station. He had his non-compete was over, and he went online with The Big Show Unfiltered, where they didn't have to follow any of the broadcast rules. And talking about the turning internet inside out, we took that radio station and we sent it to Sirius XM. So it was both online and it was on Sirius XM, and very smooth and successful, and did it from his house, and brought in his same regular crew. And then, of course, that was a talk show. So our second product is called Backbone Talk. So we do the ability to do, like Peter said, a call-in system with a screener. So it's the traditional model of internet, talk radio, what brought to the internet, where I could be screening calls here in Boston for a show in Maryland or in Chicago or whatever, and giving notes to the host. And the host could be in their home or studio or whatever, and those things can switch on and off air. The screener can put calls on the air, can talk to people, etc. The host can put them on the air, and that works. You can have a phone number anywhere you want. You can have more than one phone number anywhere you want. You can have an 800 number. It's all very flexible. And again, it uses that cloud-based situation where you can run it when you're there, it runs. And by the way, when you're not there, it can take voicemail messages and send them to you, so you can see who's left messages for you. And we have a car show. Have you heard of a guy named Pat Goss, Goss's Garage in Maryland? And when they're not on the air, you can call his number and leave a message, and he'll hear it. And that's how he'll come up with things to talk about. It's a good way to seed callers to call into your show if you have some recorded things. And going back to the Glenn Ordway example, so he did a thing. It's probably equivalents of this in every market. It's kind of the driveway moment at the end of the show that you want to listen to hear it to the end. And they called it the Whiner Line. So people would call in and say funny things, or and many of these things were very elaborate. I mean, they had people playing accordions and production and multiple, voices, etc. And they'd say funny things about sports in Boston, which is plenty to be fun to make fun of course, like in any city. And then they'd pick the best of those. They had a producer that would pull them out of our automation system, edit them down, bleep out the things that shouldn't be on air, because it was actually funnier that way, and then put a music bed under it, and then they'd play the best 5 or 6 or 7 of those. And it was a great segment, and it was always very interesting, the driveway moment. So now added on to that system, we do a joint venture with a company from the Netherlands that's called Technica de Arte. Maybe you've heard of a product called Lucy Live. Well, Backbone and Lucy have joined forces, and we do a product called Backbone CoHost with Lucy Global. And what does that mean? So what does Lucy do? Lucy has software that allows you to connect to a Comrex or a tie line and essentially do super high quality, low latency studio remotes. So the BBC uses Lucy for all of their, if you hear a remote on BBC, it's typically on Lucy. And right now, lots of that's going on. So what have we done with that? The joint venture is with our phone system, where you have multiple lines, so you have multiple people to call in, you can have multiple hosts on at the same time, and they can all talk to each other in low latency, high quality, and do a show. So where does that get used? So we do a station with the Daily Mail in London, and it's actually a website called Mail Plus. They do a live to tape 3 times a day podcast called the Daily Briefing, and they have people that calling in. They have guests calling in, but right now it's being done out of 3 different apartments around central London somewhere. I don't know where they are. They're set up with a very nice mixer called a Rodecaster. We're going to talk a little bit about some hardware. If any people have questions about that, I can answer a lot about that. We know a lot of good hardware. We don't sell any of it ourselves, but we know things that work for people. So they're set up with some good hardware, and their hosts are calling in to each other and doing their show. Their guests are calling in over traditional phone lines, and they produce all that and put that out 3 times a day, and that works from anywhere. And so they can't get into the building in Kensington, where the Daily Mail is, but they can do the same exact thing from their home. And any of you that have remote studios now, you do acoustics, etc. So doesn't sound echoey, and have the right microphone and the right gear and all that. But once you've got that, our products work just as well that as anywhere else. So basically, got radio 24/7, talk that adds in, so you can do a talk radio station with callers leaving messages that can call back in, and then also your hosts calling in remote locations. So I do a podcast with the editor of the Lowell Sun, a nice fellow named Tom Shattuck, and we live about 70 miles apart. We actually use Lucy Global to do our podcast. We do it live on an internet station, but it's sent out to basically to RSS feed. So it's on iTunes podcasts, it's on Google podcasts, it's on our website. It's everywhere it needs to be, and that's all just done automatically by our third product. So we do the remote, where we're both 70 miles apart. We very rarely get together in person to do it together, but we sound like we're in the same studio. We can both chat with each other. We can play music from either end in spots and talk about different things. And we did one this summer. I went to a wedding in England, and my friend, the day after he was married, his new father-in-law had a garden party for him, and we did a live remote from the garden party using just just a Wi-Fi at his house, and back to Tom in the U.S. And we did a show, and it went very well. We actually interviewed everyone at the garden party after the wedding, which was kind of fun, as they might have consumed more beverages that are served in the UK on occasion, and that was very interesting. And I talked about, we deliver this product, distribute it. We have a thing called Backbone Hub, which is our newest product, and essentially it's audio distribution. It does podcast RSS feeds. We can create players. We can create just file distribution. We can do Alexa news flashes with this. And here's how we did the Glenn Ordway Big Show Unfiltered out to Sirius XM. We can actually talk to Comrex or tie line devices of that type that are integrated, that work with a Lucy product. They work with us as well. And essentially, we fed Sirius XM on an automated schedule every day, 3 to 6 p.m. Showing on the air, 10 minutes before 3, went off, 3 minutes passed, stayed on. It was all automated. They didn't have to do anything in this home studio. It just went on. Before that, they had a physical Comrex, and they would literally dial it in, and didn't have to do that. It was just up, and it was reliable, and it had software that watched it, and it was all good. So we can also take that same tech, and we can feed your internet radio station to a radio transmitter. We're actually doing a station in Roanoke, Virginia right now that's about this pandemic. A friend of ours was given an FM, and so they're using our radio to basically generate a feed, and that's getting through Backbone Hub, getting sent to a tower. And they're also using Talk to take phone callers and using the Lucy Global Backbone CoHost to bring in their hosts that are different shifts around Roanoke, Virginia, all working from their home office. And it's all pretty seamless and on the air. And of course, any kind of tech operation, there's always something goes wrong with a cable or a microphone, whatever, but we essentially, we were able to pull that off. In New York City, we do a station for the Fantasy Sports Radio Network, which is actually now rebranded itself as Sports Grid. And that's fed to a network of probably 50 or 60 AM and FM stations around the country. We actually just do one feed to a satellite distributor, but that's, again, automated. They do nothing in their studio in New York to fire this up. They connect out, and off it goes. And that basically the only time we ever hear from them is for some reason it didn't connect, and usually that's someone at the other end that stayed connected to this distribution site, and we're getting a busy signal kind of thing. So that's also pretty reliable. So that's essentially I mentioned Alexa news flashes. So I think smart speakers, this is my personal view of radio, is that these smart speakers are radio. This is actually next generation 21st century radio, because you can go to a smart speaker and ask to listen to any station, listen to a podcast, listen to things just with your voice. It's very much like, hopefully it doesn't act like HAL in 2001. It's very much like, if you remember 2001: A Space Odyssey, Dr. Frank Poole would just ask HAL to play something from the BBC or move his chair, whatever. We're living in that world right now with smart speakers. So we've taken advantage of that by doing Alexa's news flash. And that's essentially goes back to the radio product. That is a category in your radio automation you upload a file to, and it goes out to that. So you can take the same file, stream it on the radio, put it into a podcast, and have it turn up as an Alexa news flash. And we're doing just that with the Golden State Warriors. You can go find this online. There's a station called Warriors Sound that runs 24/7, and it's everything going on around the Golden State Warriors. Obviously, until this year, they've had a pretty good run and been very popular, and a lot of information. We do their official podcast. We do, they do live hits. When the last time they won the championship, they did a live 3 a.m. at Morton Steakhouse, and it was, live and unfiltered, I guess. I mean, it was pretty good radio. So fun stuff, and that's just literally with a laptop, a small mixer, mixing board, some microphones. And it was very easy to do. Basically, the requirement for this was they had to be able to carry it around in a backpack. They want to have another big Pelican case full of gear, because they had enough of that already. So we literally found gear that would work with that. And I can talk a little bit about that if people have questions about gear. Glad to answer that. So that's essentially our product line. Here's a little bit what things look like. So on the right, that's the encoder program, which is showing what's playing in the cloud automation. When you cut into that, we have a live assist that will play out. And I know these slides, we talked about this. You have a handout which has pictures of this. You can look at this in a little more detail. But so my dad was the chief engineer at WRKO in Boston 53 years ago now, in 1967. During the Boss radio era. As a matter of fact, he brought WRKO on as a Boss radio station and tuned the sound so it sounded good. Well, flash forward 50 years, and the original program director, who was 27 at the time, now a bit older, he got all the original DJs who are all still around. And I'll tell you, these guys can stay up until 3 in the morning, just like they did in the 60s. Maybe they can only do it for one night, but they did it that night. And I was one of the producers of the 50th anniversary broadcast. We got 4 hours on WRKO in Boston on a Saturday night. And we actually used Backbone products to feed this. They used this live assist. So I found all the original sweepers and stingers and intros for the DJs. I found a source. It was almost like divine intervention. Literally like a CD showed up in the mail with all the original audio on it. And we cut all that together. So we had all these original DJs and their original audio and original sweepers. We had people that were with the station in the past produce different little, mementos and stories, etc. And we used that. We did Lucy Global for a lot of that, where I'd have people call in from wherever they were, because there are people that are still in radio. For example, a news guy in New York, and he had his home studio, and he connected in, and he read some news flashes for us, and I recorded them and produced them. And I did that, and I did that with a product we call Backbone Producer. So between all that, and this is, again, you could do all this on a laptop. Okay, then we'll talk about the phones. I actually have some phone software we can play with a little bit later. There'll be a number if you want to call in. We'll discuss that. And essentially, as Peter said, there's this just shows one screen of this, plus it shows our Lucy integration. Okay, but essentially, you can have a talent and you can have a screener, and on that you've got information about each call. So if they've called in the past, you know who they are. You can actually mark them as they caused some problem, and then you can decide not to answer them or drop them, etc. But essentially, this can be a mix of the Lucy. When that's a Lucy software interface that's sitting in. If anybody's used Lucy Live, this is kind of a simplified version of it, and it's a free app in the store called Lucy Global. So once you sign up for this, you just get this app, and you've got a configuration for it, and you can connect to it. Of course, it can be made with a password if you're worried about someone connecting in, but it really hasn't been an issue really, because it's really kind of a pro product. It's not something that's a viral thing that people are going to go download, but it can be password if you need to. So you call in with that, you show up as a line, and you're a high quality audio host, and then your 8 kilohertz phone calls come in. Those all get mixed together. The software in the cloud just does all the standards conversion. You don't have to think about what it sounds like, etc. Everybody hears what they're supposed to hear, and you at the studio side can put on a mix of whatever it is that you want, whatever callers you want in the air. And of course, while your callers are on hold, as in a traditional talk radio phone system, they would hear the show. And that's dependent on your mixing board. You mute your mics when you go to breaks, so they don't hear you talking about the callers. That's actually happened, which is sometimes a little embarrassing, but we won't get into that, right? And then of course, in addition to the Lucy app, this is also compatible with Comrex. So if you have a Comrex, you can dial into this phone system, and that can be in a studio or a handheld unit. So you can have one of these pretty nice product, pricey, that works great, and connect to the software just as you would if you had an app, but you can just use the app, and it's exactly the same quality. Okay, so then Backbone Hub, this is kind of a more complicated thing because there's a lot of moving parts in this. I kind of alluded to some of this. So at the core of it, you've got a radio database, a media database that lives in the cloud. And that's all of your station IDs and your music, if you're doing a music station, or podcasts, if you're doing podcasts, and recordings and news and whatever. And so you can take that, and on the right side of this, you can see these are the distributions. So it's simpler when you think about it, just in terms of where it all goes first. So you can send this out as live, or as part of our, like I mentioned, feeding out to a Comrex, or you can send FTP files to people, right? We generate an RSS feed for podcast. We mentioned Alexa news flashes, and so a lot of this is performance art. So a news flash, it's not a 40-minute podcast. It's basically something that's a few minutes long, and it's kind of a daily thing. So that's probably a specific category in your radio automation. Okay, and then eventually we're going to do Google Home. We haven't done that yet, but that's in plan to do. And then on the back side of that, I can be sitting there and recording my audio just dry, or I can be FTPing files in, or I could be calling in on Lucy Live and doing a recording. We have the ability to do that. And then we did kind of a thing. We did this for the Golden State Warriors, but it's part of the product now, where we can actually put a music bed underneath your dry audio. So if you're a radio professional and you're able to do a quick 2 minutes or a minute or whatever it is, and just not make a mistake, etc., or even if you do, we can set it up so it doesn't go to air immediately. You can record your dry audio, and then a predetermined pre-roll, some music bed underneath it, and a post-roll get added in software, and that gets put in this cloud database, and then you can decide how you distribute that. So you can literally be doing, as a matter of fact, Golden State's done hits from the team bus with Lucy, and in someplace where there's good cell service, right? And it all goes pretty well. So what do we do with this tech? Well, we talked a little bit about it, but I have some photos I can show you. So one thing Backbone does is we started out with a college radio network, because that's a great place to test out. So Kelly wanted his own radio station back in the day when he was in college, correct? And so we actually have a large network of college radio stations. We work with a group called the Intercollegiate Broadcasting System, or IBS. Very hard to forget that, the 3-letter name of it. But in our case, it's just radio. There's nothing really nefarious about it. And so we have a network of colleges, and it turns out we're great for college radio because that cloud automation stays on 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And so when school's out, you're not on campus. Like right now, basically colleges aren't there. And our college network, there are many stations that are still producing programming daily. We have some high schools, and they're doing music shows, et cetera, from their homes and having a great time doing it using Lucy and phones and doing the live radio. They're running just the way they were when they were at school, except they're all at home. So it turns out having that 24-hour a day setup is actually a great thing to do. It just, we keep it all running.
Call.
And there's someone calling me right now.
Call.
Who's calling me? Let's see. Let's take a look.
Call.
We may not take this call. We could take this call. Is it someone we know?
Call.
I don't know who that is.
Call.
Let's drop that call.
Call.
I don't know who that is. So a call just came in, by the way. So we'll go back to that in a little bit. But we'll talk about that in a moment. Anyway, so the college network. Here's the other thing about College Station. So a lot of times, just in normal times, when people go home for the summer and whatever, and there's go back to that first slide I showed you where you've got all the automation and all the studio living on campus. Well, no one's there if there's a power failure. We had a school that their tower was hit by lightning, and it was in the same building as the studio, and it essentially fried everything. So they were well off the air, except the cloud kept going. And they got a laptop and a mixing board, and they went and did their station. It took them a while to get their terrestrial side back up, but we kept them going. So we're great for keeping your station on the air. And I'll tell you, there have been a few schools that I've gone to, and people have come in and said, I decided to go to this school because I heard the station, and I just thought this is a great community. So really, you're advertising yourself. That's your biggest advertiser when you do college radio. You're talking about how great the school is and what a community is. And that's a great way to get more people to turn up at your school. So if that station's not there when you are basically, tuning in on the school's website, you assume it's off the air. Maybe it's not going to come back, and there's nothing interesting, come in. So we're really good at keeping that going. Okay, so let's see, what else have we got? So, oops. Let me go to my slideshow. There we go. All right. So we've also done a lot of sports. So for about 5 or 6 years, we did radio for Major League Lacrosse. I believe most of their teams are really kind of east of the Rockies. They're in the Northeast. Maryland is a big area in the Northeast for lacrosse. But this is the Pro Outdoor Lacrosse League, and their league was headquartered in Boston. So we did kind of a blanket station for them, and they produced it themselves. They'd bring in interns or people, that on staff there to do things. But we would go and do a live game at Harvard Stadium. But eventually they set up other teams with the same software on the same station, because again, everything's a remote. So you could bring up the phones and you could bring up the radio at the stadium, wherever that was, and do your play-by-play, and it all went very well. And then repeat all that, later on, so you could have game repeats. And we even did. They did their championship in a weekend, and I think now they do 2 weeks. By the time when we did it, they did a weekend in Philadelphia, and we went out to a great riverfront stadium, and they'd give us an internet connection that didn't work, so we did it with a wireless puck for the weekend, and it all went to plan. So it really is just having a good network. And again, did play-by-play and took calls, and you could send a sideline reporter with Lucy down to the field to go and record things. All right, so let's see. So then we did some stuff for TuneIn in the past. This is Hot 97 Summer Jam in the New York area at the Meadowlands. And essentially, we were out in a parking lot again on a wireless device, and we did some pre-concert sets with different people, and that was also done on video, a separate thing, but we shared the internet with them. But we did that back to TuneIn, and then we did the entire broadcast of the 5 or 6 hour concert. We had a feed, and we were back, and we were actually in the coach's locker room at the Meadowlands, where they have all the photos of what the penalties look like. It's very interesting. So they teach the refs the new rules by showing them what it looks like. But we were in that room, it was off season, and we did our thing. And again, all pretty much flawless. And then we did a bunch of stuff at South by Southwest. So our company used to exhibit there for a number of years, and we would just pick up different shows. We did some stuff for TuneIn. We did some stuff for the Berklee School of Music. So we'd set up with, so this was actually the official showcase for Whole Foods, which is based in Austin, Texas. So we had some Berkeley kids that had arranged that got the contract for that and hired us to the back end for it. And we were just set up in a field on wireless, and it all went great. We did some live music, we did a lot of interviews, etc. And of course, then we did the official Berkeley showcase, and again, just using kind of a just standard mixing board. There's our radio software running, and did not do phone calls for this, but we did all radio. But again, live bands, and then interview them at the end of it. So it's great radio and all pretty lightweight, And then the cool thing about South by Southwest is, you can go somewhere at 1 a.m. and find some fantastic band you've never heard of, and we could webcast it. So that was pretty cool stuff. And we did Outside Lands for TuneIn at Golden Gate Park. And again, that was, a lot of very well-known acts, and we'd bring them in and interview them. There was a little production company hired to do that side of it, and we just did all the distribution. So I was there to make sure the network was working and all the audio was good, and all good fun. So in New York City, we do, I mentioned this earlier, the Fantasy Sports Radio Network, and so they use pretty much everything we do. We alluded to the terrestrial component where we're sending them out to a satellite network, but of course we do internet radio feeds. They have they're in iHeartRadio, they're on TuneIn, they're on their own website, and that's a 24-hour service, and they do about 18 hours a day live. And they have a great studio that's in a rooftop bar right across from Madison Square Garden, and you can kind of see that on there. They also do video, which is not with our gear, but we do the radio side of it. And right now that's being run out of an apartment on the east side. And but hosts are done with Lucy Global, so we've probably set up well over 150 people over the maybe 5 years we've been doing this as an ongoing thing. And they're sitting at home, and they standardize on a nice broadcast headset and audio interface that Fantasy sends them, connect to their computer. We help them configure it up, and then they do their shows. There's someone in the studio doing those radio stop sets for their breaks, and it's a huge money saver for them because they don't have to go buy them hardware, but for each guy, and it's very flexible. They just did some stuff from the draft, the NFL draft. Again, all done back from someone's apartment, and eventually they'll be back in their great studio. But in radio, really, what you hear, it doesn't really matter what the studio looks like. It matters what the content is. So that's pretty cool stuff. And then last summer we did the NBA Summer Leagues, and this was kind of through our connection with Golden State. The Summer Leagues are kind of where new talent shows up. And it's in Las Vegas in July, which is, obviously, thank God they have air conditioning. You need a lot of water there at that time of year, but and other things sometimes happen. But that's again done with just a laptop, and we used a mixer. If you want to get the bits and bytes of this, called the Mix Pre 6 from Sound Devices, which is a great little product. And it's meant to be a video assist, for doing your recording, and it'll do time codes, etc. But it turns out it's great for radio, and they do a MIDI control surface for it. So we did that. That was literally just a backpack of gear that was doing this, and we had a feed from the floor with kind of shoes and nets, the squeaks, and we had play-by-play people that were there doing pretty much every game, and some of them were with a youth group that they'd bring in students who were just over the moon to be on a real NBA broadcast, with a pro broadcaster, and they'd come in and do a quarter. But we also did feeds back for terrestrial stations. We put the call out that we have this service available. So we had maybe 4 or 5 teams that were online feeding back to their terrestrial station. I mean, actually, how many of you, do any of you remember there was an earthquake in Las Vegas during the Summer League? There was one on July 4th, and then there was one that was larger on July 5th. And as a matter of fact, that was during our broadcast, and I have a little clip of it right here.
And as we're doing this right now, we can feel a little bit of a shake here. It seems to be a little bit of a.
This is my first earthquake, by the way. Maybe you California are laughing at me.
You see a lot of things shaking, including the scoreboard here.
We were at the outside edge of it, so it was very gentle, and the whole place just moved back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then and of course, here's the thing about my first earthquake, and I guess, like I said, those of you who've been through other earthquakes, you'll laugh at me, but number one, you don't know it's coming. Number two, you don't know how serious it's going to be. And number three, you don't know when it's going to end. So there's very much kind of sit back and look around and see what and react to the moment. And we stayed on the air for that.
George,
Yes,
this
sir.
is Pete. Was that a video you were showing us? Because we didn't see the video.
That was actually audio. That was actually part of the radio. That was the
audio,
live hit from the radio broadcast. Correct. That was our radio broadcast. So that went live back to the New Orleans Pelicans flagship station in New Orleans, live on the air. We did not lose power. We did not lose internet. So we stayed on for that. But they did stop all the games because the scoreboard was kind of just slowly moving back and forth, you know, and the whole building was kind of doing that for a couple of minutes. It seemed it was a long time. And, you know, nothing bad happened. They did bring in 2 structural engineers the next morning that didn't know each other to look at the building and decide whether it was safe to do so. They were going to cancel the event if it didn't happen, but it was good. So we kept going. That was the last earthquake. But yeah, the remote thing worked really well. So we did, like I said, 4 or 5 different teams. We did the championship of this, you know, tournament, which is kind of a fun thing. And, you know, it was a cool thing. And well, we have plans to do it this year, but we're not sure that's going to happen at the moment. But you know, there'll be a summer at some point. We'll be back, and we're going to do a bigger radio row with hosts that'll be able to interview people, you know, from teams and stuff between games, etc., as well as do the game broadcasts. And we also produce. I have a slide. Let's see, what have I got left? No, that's not. I don't have that. The latest thing we've done is we did a radio row at New Hampshire Primary with the Lowell Sun. Again, my friend Tom, and also another Backbone customer, Franklin Pierce University. They do a station called Franklin Pierce Radio Global. And so we had a spot on Radio Row, and we brought people in, and we just we did both a podcast and we did live radio with that. And then the Lowell Sun was making news from this. So we actually had James Carville, you know, not going to politics or anything, but you know, he was very outspoken during that early political season. And he came up and did that for us on the air, and it made news in Boston and New England, a little bit nationwide. So that was pretty cool. So and again, you can see in this photo the gear we had. We have that's a great, my favorite mixer of the moment, by the way, is from Rode, called the Rodecaster Pro. We'll talk about that a little bit. But essentially, you know, it's a very nice compact, does all the nice radio things that you need for phone calls and all that in a nice compact package. So let's see, anything else? Let's see what I got here. Yeah, back to the beginning. So anyway, so that is that. And I guess, does anybody have any questions? And you can ask me about a specific kind of thing you'd like to do, and I would go on with that and could tell you a lot of details.
No questions yet. Could we just see the actual technical setup and operation and programming of the thing and how it?
We could do some things.
Into a little detail of how you actually connect to a radio station, that sort of stuff.
Sure. So let's start with phones, and I can probably bring up some radio as well if we'd like to. And so this is both sides of Backbone Talk, the talent and the screener side. And the screener has a little bit more in the way of configurability. You can basically talk back to people that are there. You can put calls on the air. You can drop. I have an air monitor here, so I can hear what's going on the station. I see they're both connected, and there's the phone number. So again, the audio for this is you know, not set up quite correctly. There'll be maybe a little bit of echo and things just because we're doing multiple things at one time. But if someone wants to call in, we have a number, 617-500-2257. Give us a call, and perhaps we'll put you on the air. And you'll at least be able to hear me. I have this rigged up, so I'm just using the microphone on my computer to talk. But if someone wants to call us, and we can also do a Lucy call in a little bit as well. But essentially,
what was that number again?
617-500-2257. If there's anyone in the UK, we actually have a UK number for this particular phone system as well.
Call.
All right.
Call
in. So notice the screener side will say the word call.
Call.
And if I answer that, I can now put some, hello, hi, can you hear me?
Hi, this is Kelly.
Kelly. Oh, Kelly. Of course I know you. So I can put your name in here. And you're in Chicago, I think, right?
I am. First time caller, long time listener.
All right. So he wants his own radio station. We have the calls are coming in. All right. So we won't blacklist you. We'll put you on hold. All right.
Call.
So another call coming in. Hello. And who's this?
This is Steve Savanu from Ohio.
Steve calling from Ohio, and I'm guessing you'd like to talk about talk radio as well, right?
Oh, talk radio is fun.
It's good stuff. All right, and then
Call.
there's a third caller, and again that makes that sound call, so that if you're not paying attention, you can hear that. So all right, so who have we got on line 3? Hello.
So I've got a lot to talk about here.
Is that you? Is that you, Pete?
That's me. That's
Okay,
me.
so-
Exactly.
And we're hearing you're a little bit echo because you're on the meeting, Pete in Chicago. All right.
Well, no, I have my mic. Oh, wait, I have to turn my mic off.
Yeah, there you go.
Now is my mic.
There
on.
you go. Now that's much
my
better.
mic
Yeah,
on.
we were having a little bit of echo, but you notice the latency is probably a little bit better on this than the meeting. It's slightly less. So a lot to talk about. All right. So
Oh, definitely a lot to talk.
put you on hold now. So now I'm gonna put people on air all together, and I can conference you all together. And now we're all on the air together.
So, Steve, is the
Hey.
entire East Coast
Kelly.
internet still out?
No, it just came back on. So they're working on a railroad
Call.
track a block from my house, and they may have
Call.
changed the cable.
Uh-oh, that's not good. We have
Call.
another call coming in. All right, so while they're on the air, I'm going to screen this. We have more calls coming in. And who's this?
Call. Call. Call.
Oh, no, he hung up. I'm sorry. Oh, he went away. Okay, so we have our 3 calls on, but you kind of get the idea. I can bring these in. So let me show you something else while we're doing this. I'm going to go to my desk camera, and I'm going to bring up my phone, and I'll show you our Lucy Global. Let's see. I guess no one would steal my phone.
Hey, am I on the phone with the famous Pete Erskine?
Yes,
from
you are.
PST
One
webinar?
and the only.
famous
One and the only, exactly.
Awesome.
And I'm hearing the
Awesome.
seminar through the monitor speakers in our studio, which is even
Yeah,
great.
again, the audio is going to be probably a little
Turn
different.
your radio down.
Exactly correct.
Okay, caller, you just caller number 43. You've won the trip for 2 to Washington D.C.
We have
If
no
you can identify the last 4 songs we played.
we have no
Heck, I
dump
don't
button, by
remember
the
what
way.
those
So you
were.
guys have to behave yourselves. I just want to bring
What
that
song?
up.
That's
What
right.
song?
So I'm showing the last piece. This is Lucy Global. Okay, so let me show you. Lucy they make a nice little audio interface called the Mickey, and they have various variants of it. This is a USB-C version. You can see that, but there's also one that if you have a phone that has a headphone jack, they've got that, or an audio adapter. They've got a regular USB version. So you get, if you have an iPhone, you can get their Apple's adapter. And I just plug this into my phone. I'm gonna get that under the camera and do it at the same time. All right, there we go. Whoops. Over that way, okay. And then that's connected, and I've just got a nice.
Show us your password.
I suggest, then you could all, you'd have to mug me to get my phone, right? But I've got it. This has got a nice XLR on it. So if I call in
Call.
on this,
Call.
I show up as a
Call.
call on Lucy,
Call.
and I'm just
Call.
on the phone system, and I'm just going to put this guy. I know who this is, because it's me. And now I'm on the air with this, and I'm talking in high quality, and you're probably hearing that coming back through. Again, the audio is not all perfect,
we are.
but
Yeah, we
there
are.
it is.
Good.
And so now I'm a host taking phone calls, and I'm doing this remotely, and I'm just using a handheld mic. And I also have a little headset just plugged into it. This device has got just a tiny little connector on it, an 1/8-inch connector. But you can use it with a headset or whatever.
Can I get that in a Mickey 2 Red Dot version?
Maybe. I'm sure anything's possible in today's world. And on the remote side, I'm just doing this over Wi-Fi, but I could easily just do it over 4G. And it's a pretty cool thing. At the summer leagues, we use this to do sideline reporting for our broadcast. We sent down one of the Golden State's producer with a microphone and a headset, and would just basically kind of do that and talk to people.
So does Lucy just have a preset dialing number, phone number in it already? So when you push that button,
Right.
it
So
calls your
when you
office?
sign up for this, I'll actually drop this call. I'll show you how that all works out. So there's a directory. When you sign up for this, we essentially get you an entry in it, and you go connect to this. You can see there's newspapers, there's radio, there's things in Europe there, and this is the one we're on. You select that, and you're done. That's the configuration for it, and then everything else is pretty much just there, you know, and then it's just a one button thing. So if you're a regular user at one radio station, you just set up for this. And of course, Lucy, for slightly more money, will make a dedicated one for you where they don't have to do that config. They'll just dial in.
It'd be one number, right?
And it's just one button and off it goes. And then it's your own little private thing. And the cool thing about this is, you know, with the phone system, obviously we've got to pay for phone minutes, right? So there's like a minute charge, kind of like buying a cell phone plan. I think we give you 2,500 minutes a month, which is enough to get in some trouble, you know, and not run any extra cost in there. But with Lucy, it's unlimited. It's a limited number of people. It's unlimited number of time. And so you can pretty much go to town with that and, you know, run your whole station.
Because the phone chargers are being made by the cell phone.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And so by the way, so Lucy product is available I'm on Android, and it's on Android. It's obviously on iOS. There's a Windows version, there's a Mac version. And so essentially anything that matters.
If that dialed into a regular phone number, would it just act like a phone call to that regular phone number?
So the regular caller would just hear that as phone quality. Exactly. So the software in the cloud is just doing all that standards conversion and audio conversion and just, right. It's just, you know, without you doing anything. So you said you had your friend who's not technical. This is perfect for her because she could you know, just run as necessary.
Sure.
So just
I went to download it. I went to download it and I decided $27 wasn't worth it to.
Actually, it's Lucy. It's Lucy Global, so you don't have to. There is a Lucy Live that costs something. That's their light version.
$25. Okay.
Yeah, this is free. Lucy Global is free.
And what comes with the $25?
So the $25 one, you can connect it to go configure to a Comrex, and it doesn't do the same quality as this. It does you're in radio. G722 is, you know, that codec. If we want to go to bits and bytes, right? It's a good codec. It's a good voice codec, but it's not Opus 48 kilohertz, which is what this is based on.
Oh, good. Cool.
So you could do music with it. You know, you could do a lot of good sounding remotes with this.
So I've had it with you. I'm not going to listen anymore. So I'm going to say goodbye.
All right. Good night.
I have a question.
Or we could drop you, actually, Pete. We could drop you, Pete, if we had to.
Yeah, drop Pete.
I'm going to drop. I know this is everyone's dream that's listening to these every day, right? He's dropped. There he is. He's off the air. But Kelly will keep, right? We'll keep Kelly on the air.
Yeah, that's right. Because I got a question for you.
All right, go ahead, Kelly.
A couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm back.
This is talk radio, isn't it? But keep going. Go ahead.
I love that. This is what I love. Is this off-the-shelf interface for the phone? Is that something I can buy? Is that something that's like for the XLR and the
it is
3.5 millimeters?
So this is a product that Lucy developed themselves to, you know, that they manufacture in Europe. That's purpose designed for this. So it's tuned to their hardware. It's, you know, it's great stuff. It's very reliable. They back it up, etc. However, in a worst case scenario, you can put a stereo headset into the earpiece of your phone, and then use your phone, hold your phone like it's a microphone, and talk into it, and that works just as well.
Gotcha. And so now you mentioned that, and it sounds like it's built to mix minus. You don't have to worry about any of that, right?
Right. So the phone system does a mix minus for every caller. You do have to do a mix minus on your studio side, which is gotten easier now with some of these mixers we could talk about. But yes, it does the mix minus. It does a mix minus for each call just automatically. There's nothing to think about, and it's just all done.
And then, like Pete was mentioning, it sounds like if I dial into the number, then I'm phone quality, right? But if I were connecting via the and I'm calling in, obviously I'm phone quality. But on yours with the remote, you have a codec. Is that correct?
So essentially the Lucy app has got built in the Opus codec, which is 48 kilohertz audio,
correct.
And, you know, super high quality, just sounds, you know, fantastic. It's better than CD. CD quality is 44 kilohertz, you know, FM is 16 kilohertz, right? So this is fantastic quality. But if you have a Comrex codec, that physical handheld device that you take on the road, you can configure that to call into this and come in on that, and that does that same Opus codec, because that's Opus is an open source codec, and it's available to anyone. There's no royalty on it. I mean, I think, you know, there's probably been some legal thing in the past about it, but it seems to still be available and free and open, and it's a great sounding codec, and it's you know, very low bandwidth and very high quality. All the things you can imagine that are goodness about radio. And so you can connect in with one of those devices as well.
All right. Well, that's what I needed to know. I'm so glad I called into the show.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to blacklist him now, by the way. Just going to.
Yeah. Take me out so no people know.
We'll put you on hold and we'll blacklist you. So let's see. I'll answer it again.
All right.
Blacklist. All right. So yeah, there you go. So now when Kelly calls back, we're going to know he's trouble, right? And we could decide whether we want him or not, but we'll probably have him in. So Kelly, we're gonna hang up on you too, Kelly. So do we have a question from the audience? I'm happy to go in any direction you'd like. I could actually start talking about mixers if you'd like. Could that be something interesting? What do you think, Pete and Kelly?
Well, I'm surprised that there's no questions because this is a fascinating subject. And
maybe I've answered everything that's possible about it. So they have no questions.
I'd love to go into the mixer.
Let's talk about some mixers. So my two favorite mixers of the moment. All right, so here's the thing. This is essentially for radio. It's actually pretty easy. Any USB mixer is terrific because they've got a built-in stereo channel that comes out, and you just set our software to this, and off it goes, and it's good. For phones, we've mentioned the word mix minus. We have a show of hands of who doesn't know what a mix minus is. Or maybe this is if we were an audience together, you could do this. But so mix minus is very simple. All it is when I'm talking to you on the phone, I do not want to hear my own voice coming back, because no matter what technology you're using that uses telephone, or unless it's analog telephone or cell phone or this, there is some latency. It's very tiny. You could hear a little bit of it when we had the meeting on live, and we had the Lucy software or the phone software running. You could tell the phone was slightly ahead of it. There was a slight little echo, but it's very disconcerting unless you're a radio professional who knows how to talk through this and just ignore it. For anyone calling in normally, if you hear your own voice, you're constantly stopping and listening to yourself.
But that latency is 99% leakage from the caller's earpiece to the microphone.
And it can be. There is that issue, but do you have to do this on the mixer ahead of otherwise you have the complete full volume version of it echoing back. So there's a thing called mix minus. That's what a mix minus is. So in an analog mixer, any of you are familiar with analog mixers, they have faders for each channel. And then there's one or more auxiliary buses, which are basically, you can pump audio into that separately and make a separate mix. And so what you do is you take the phone channel, you turn off the auxiliary, and you turn up the auxiliary on all the microphone, production music, whatever else you've got going in as sound. And then you have the phone software listen to the output of that auxiliary channel. So that's the mix minus. They don't hear themselves. So that can be, cabling issues, audio interface issues, etc. So this first mixer I've got, go ahead.
You talked about having a host and a preview person, but what if you have multiple hosts? How many hosts can you have?
So the software is one limitation of the software is you can have one copy of the screen or one of the talent at any time. However, you can have other hosts that are on Lucy or on apps that are just going to talk, and they don't need to see things. And there's also there's a Lucy app. There's a Lucy app. Like I said, it's in the App Store. There's a Windows one we provide you. There's one for Android, and there's one for iOS.
So those are all with the same codec.
Correct. And it's just baked in. As soon as you do that one connection that we looked at earlier, where essentially, let's go look at that again.
So if you had a show with, let's say, Kelly, Pete, and Mac, and Bruce, Kelly could be on the basic unit with the telephone lines.
Correct.
The rest of us would be on Lucy Global.
Correct. And so you just configure that in this app. Once you've done that configuration to what setting it is, then you're set. You're done. You're connect in. You dial right in. You're on, and you're up on the air when you need to be on the air. So my favorite mixer of the moment. Again, we don't sell these, so we make no money from this. But it's in our interest and to be in your interest to make your life easy and give you an easy way to broadcast, so you don't have to worry about this. This is your friend Pete that you mentioned. That's not very technical. This is the perfect mixer for her. Because it does, once it's set up, and we help you with that. Well, that's what we do. We're using GoToWebinar for this. We use GoToMeeting so we can see and control your screen and talk to you like you're in the same studio, the same room with us, right? And this mixer, the Rodecaster Pro, does that mix minus in software. There's two devices that appear on your computer. One's the mix minus, and the other one's just a full mix of everything. And you connect the phones to the mix minus one. You connect whatever you're recording or your live encoder, whether it's ours or someone else's or YouTube or whatever, to that second device. That's the mix of everything. And it's just super simple and beautiful and easy. And actually little buttons on it. You see those buttons? Let's see, what have I got?
Can you show a close-up of the actual screen better than that?
Let's see, we could probably find a picture of that somewhere. Let's see what we got. There's those little pads over here. So that's a little sound thing. And I've got, if I have a good joke, we've got that. So let's see if we can find a better picture of this. And I believe we can.
Yeah, that is a really great product. That, you know, just I'm hoping a lot of other manufacturers see what they've done with this and try and create really brilliant, simple solutions for the user. But it's quite complex what it does internally, but just brings that whole mix minus thing. And this, you can plug your phone into it. Just really, really smart.
And it's got four mic inputs, and it's got sound processing on it. So it does audio compression, so you can limit levels. It does audio enhancement. There's a codec called Aphex, which you may or may not have heard of, which is good. I'm actually not a big believer in doing lots of processing, although I have it on this, you know, but they've just released an update to their firmware. You can tune it. So I have it tuned to the point where it sounds good, right? And but in a normal situation where, like you said, your friend who's not a person who is that technical, they can turn this on and then not worry about that ever again. And very simple, when your fader is all the way to the top, that's, you know, you tune that for being your perfect level. So it's kind of up or down, or if something's very loud, you can tweak it. Again, you got the 4 microphones, you've got the USB, which when you're doing phones, that's your phone channel. That's the mix minus channel. Then you get another feed, which is just an analog in, and that could be, I'm using it to feed in, you know, when I played out the clip of the earthquake, right? That was over the analog input. So I'm using the mix minus channel for the meeting on this mixer. I'm actually on a Rodecaster right now doing this meeting or doing this presentation. And then finally, USB, you could bring your phone in, you could bring another USB device in. I don't tend to use that so much, but it's pretty good. I just think a Bluetooth connection is not as reliable as something wired. So I tend to try to avoid that for broadcast, but in a pinch, you can do it. So this record button, it'll record, so you can record your podcast right on it. And there's an interface to get to it. It says 4 headsets. So for your 4 mics, each of those 4 people have one. There's another headset that goes in the front. You got speaker output. So someone really thought this out, as you suggested, Kelly. They thought this out, and they did it in such a way that, you know, it's easy to use. And of course, these are the pads where I can play the sound effects, right? And, you know, whatever. And you can put your own sounds on this. So you can do intros to things and outros. Like, I think I got something from.
This is NBA Sound System at NBA Summer League in Las Vegas.
So that was our Summer League's intro and outro. So we were using this particular mixer on the concourse at the Thomas and Mack Center to record podcasts while we were doing separately with another mixer I'm going to show you in a moment, the live production. So they could play their in and out, record it, and then just take a file and upload it with like 0 production on it. It's a pretty sweet device. This is kind of the fair-haired a thing of the moment. You know, obviously things change, there'll be something better, but this really does all the right things.
Is there a simple diagram of the audio flow in this mixer?
I mean, there's probably stuff on their website, but I mean, it's actually pretty simple.
What are all the instant buttons on the right?
So those buttons are those are eight different sounds that comes with a set of sounds from the factory, but that's this, you know, things like this are stuff that's on it, right? And then you can add your own things like
this is NBA Sounds,
and there's a drag and drop interface for that.
What is the length of the clip you can put in each one?
It's kind of what you want. I mean, obviously, I don't think it's probably up to how much memory you have. I don't know that there's a limit to it. I mean, but it's really kind of meant, again, for short things.
The memory is on your laptop or inside this
it's
mixer?
Inside the device. It's inside the device. right? And again, we don't
And
sell
it's
this, but it solves a lot of problems.
non-volatile.
So we look at, and it's non-volatile. Yep. And you turn it off, it's still there. So it's a pretty sweet device, and they keep improving the firmware on it. So that's
So it doesn't really, it just basically plugs in where you need a mix minus. One of the inputs is a mix minus.
so there's actually one USB cable that goes in your computer, and in software, two devices magically appear on your computer, and you choose one for the phones and another for for the main mix. They call it multi-channel.
And this is in the Backbone software for the call-in software.
So
where you choose.
so in the Backbone software. So again, I've configured this to just use the built-in microphone, the built-in output. If I was doing this for real, I would be using. We wouldn't be able to hear. You would have heard me, but we wouldn't have heard it on the air because it wouldn't go out in the mix, right? Because I'm using this mix minus capability for the meeting so that it doesn't squelch itself, right? So I'm just using
if this mixer were plugged in, you'd see them show up on the microphone and the speaker menus.
Correct. So yep, and you can configure that to whatever device you have. So now, if you're back in the analog mixer world where you don't have this nice thing in software, you need a separate audio device on your computer, and we're Mac based just because the audio devices are really reliable on Mac. Whereas Windows, it's sort of a horror show. We have some plans for the future to do some Windows stuff, but not yet.
Strangely enough, that's the answer we get from everybody in the entire audio business.
Right, exactly. So that's Apple's. Apple doesn't seem to care about
with a PC version, right?
Yeah, exactly. Not to get political, but Apple doesn't seem to care about the pro audio and pro video people as much as they once did. But
except that audio is much easier to control and program in a Mac than in a PC.
Correct, it is, because their audio devices work really well. I'll tell you, Apple's secret is that there really is one piece of hardware for each increment of new computers. So that way their operating system works exactly the same way because they tune all the drivers to work perfectly with that software, that hardware, so that it's very simple. So you can essentially plug in this device and it magically appears as an audio device. And on the Rodecaster, when you set up their mix minus, that magically appears. And so that's why we're Mac based, but we have plans to do that in the future, but with other things. But if you didn't have a nice mixer like this that's so simple, then you have to have a separate device that has an input and output, because it used to be Macs had analog in and out, but they don't anymore. They just have an output, and it's questionable how long there'll be a headphone jack there. Correct? They're good at removing ports lately in the last 20 years. Right? Every once in a while, things disappear, and so you need a separate audio device that has the input and the output, and then you tune the phone to that. So in this case, I'm using the built-in microphone, the built-in output. But if I had a secondary audio device, I would select that. And essentially that would all magically go to plan, and that way you could use that. I talked about earlier on an analog mixer, the auxiliary bus that allows you to take out the caller audio from the mix that the phone system's hearing. So you plug the output of that auxiliary into your analog audio device. So a number of people do that, and that works, very well. This is just nicer. So when I showed let's see, I'll find go back and find. In my slideshow, let me just bop over to the Summer League, because I'm going to show you the second mixer. We'll get to that. There it is. So this is the Mix Pre 6, and also a little control surface that they have. I'll talk about this for a bit. This was my favorite mixer, but it requires that you have that mix minus is a little more complicated. You can actually do it in software with just two cables. You got to buy a separate piece of software for this, but this has got better sounding. In my opinion, again, audio is very subjective. In my opinion, Sound Devices sounds better than the Rodecaster. The Rodecaster is just so much more convenient. And this is super small. So this is what Golden State found, and they carry it around with them. And this is the backpack thing. So I was able to travel light to Las Vegas and just bring that. And they've done some cool stuff with software updates where in that photo, let's see, I'll show that to you. You can see on the desk, my slideshow went back to the beginning. We'll get to this. We've got another hour, right? So we're good. We have plenty of time to go find this. So there is a control surface, and that's just a MIDI controller that you might use to control lights or anything else that you would do with MIDI. And they've gone and done integrations with these so that those are your microphone channels. I don't know if you can see there's some tape on those. I got 1, 2, 3, and 4. And 4 is actually the floor audio we got from ESPN. And then the other 2 are the USB, and then the analog audio that we use for doing the phones, right, as well. So the way you work with this is you use the analog channel as your return channel.
A couple of pictures back, you had a Rodecaster Pro and a Sound Devices Pro Mix Pre 6 on the same time. Why were we using 2 mixers?
So that would be, let's see, where is that? Let's find that. So was it this Radio Room? I think we had 2 Roadcasters here. We did not bring the, there was more room to drive up to New Hampshire, so they had a truck and they brought their own gear.
No sound devices also?
No sound devices there, but I tend to use that for things where when I did the garden party in England, that was a Mix Pre 6, so I could carry that on in my luggage, just carry it in a backpack on the plane with that and do completely everything I needed to do. So, but they're really equivalent as far as quality. This one's a little bit more work to set up, but it makes it up in being very portable. And again, that has 4 microphones in that really just their mic preamps just sound terrific. So you have a very good sound.
Right.
And it's not that the Rodecaster is a slouch. I just think this is better.
Now, when the callers called in, when I called in, the caller prompt, the boing and the everything, the ring, we heard that.
Correct.
That would normally only be heard by the
screener. So the screener, so let's say the screener can be someone that, and usually is someone that's not in any way, shape, or form connected to your main mix. They're in another room or another state or another continent, and they hear that locally to get their attention while they're doing that, or for example, we did Boston Herald's internet radio station for 7 years, 6.5 years. And they had a little closed studio where they could hear that call and someone coming in, and that would not go out on the air.
What if you were doing this solo? Can you only get the ring in your earphone?
So it can be set up so that essentially it makes no sound. So you're just watching it. So there's a performance art to this, that if you're going to be on the air, you can't be screening calls. You could do it during a break, but that's the only time you can do it. So you're much better off if you can do a screener, somewhere else.
So you get your 6-year-old or somebody like that to screen the calls. Correct. And then put them on. That works for me.
And you may laugh at saying a 6-year-old could do it, but we actually have a middle school in Indiana, not too far, Plymouth, Indiana. How far away is that from Chicago? That's about an hour or so drive, I think, right?
Yeah, not too far, I don't think.
Near South Bend. I've never been there, but so when they got phones, suddenly kids wanted to come in early and be on the radio because it was like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. They were calling in and pranking each other, and they were using the blacklist, and and it really just made it all pop. And these are middle school kids who are about 10 or 12, 13 that are running this, and no problem at all learning how to do it. So it literally can be someone, very young doing it, and they had a blast with it and still continue to do so to this day.
So this was a high school, middle school radio station they started?
Middle school radio station that's in about this 4th or 5th year now with us. And they
run around and interview teachers with their Lucy's?
They go run around and interview teachers. They go do live sports. They use the Lucy stuff to do sideline reporting. Yeah. It's all pretty self-contained, and they all get it. And it all works very, very nicely. So yes.
Cool.
And they have a good time doing it too, by the way. And that, so I think the thing that's cool about this is that what the point of people going to school is that you want to give them something they're going to want to do in their life, right? That they're not going to be, they're not just miserable doing, math tables or whatever. And they all got into this. And there are a few kids now they've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. They've gone on to high school and college and are doing stuff in media because we got them started, me just in the sort of technical sense. I never met any of them, but we got them started in doing this. We used to have a school in greater Los Angeles area in the San Fernando Valley called Champs Charter School. And that is a performing arts kind of thing, magnet school, where you've got to kind of apply to get into it, run by the LA school district. And so they had a radio station, and I happened to be there at the end of their school year. It was because it was right about this time of year after NAB. Would go out to LA, after NAB, because it's easy. It's an easy short flight on Southwest to Burbank, right? And you're in the area. And so they had a barbecue at the end of the year for all the parents. And the parent came up to me and said, my daughter was kind of getting with the wrong crowd last year, but now she joined radio. Maybe that's a worse crowd, I don't know. But no, she said this has been fantastic for her, and she's now doing better in school and doing the right things. And I'm really glad she had a radio station. So radio is in any kind of media. If you're doing video, or if you're doing radio, or if you're doing podcasts, or making music, it's going to give you something positive to do, something that you carry through your life. So we think this is a pretty cool educational thing. And like I said, we've been working with the intercollegiate broadcasting system for over 10 years. And in fact, I have an overnight support guy. He went to school in Boston, and he was a student GM, and then he became a Fulbright scholar, which I said, I didn't know you were that smart. I guess he is, right? So he goes to Latvia to teach English, and met a girl, got married. They have a little girl of their own now. He's living in Latvia. He does my overnight support. So because he's 7 hours ahead, and he'll just monitor stuff. He just wants someone that can do it when no one's in the office, and he's happy to do it. And we just send him a little money every month, right? So it's all good. So it's kind of neat to see that students go on to their careers and in media, or do things because of media that have helped them, and just by giving them an easy way to get on the air. Because I mean, what is the what was sort of the issue with broadcasting years ago was there were gatekeepers, right? It was hard to get on Kelly, you can't get your station, the FCC, or no one's going to give you the money to build a transmitter. With this, it's a lot lower cost entry. You can get on the air and find your way, and things that are good get discovered. That's sort of the miracle of the internet, that you have to get through all the noise. There's more access, but there's no gatekeeper, but it's harder to get noticed. But if you're good, I believe you get found. So it's a neat thing. So these are the two, to go back to the hardware side of, these are the two mixers that we like a lot, because they're not so expensive, and they're good quality, and they prove to be reliable for us. And we've gone through some other things that look good and they weren't, and we don't recommend them. We won't mention any names out of school notes, but there's stuff that looks interesting that isn't. But these two have proven to have the test of time, that they're good. And the Rodecaster, they keep improving it with firmware. They're definitely listening to their customers. That's a pretty cool product. I believe they've sold a lot of these. And again, we don't sell them. We don't make any money off them. But if you're doing this kind of thing, it's something I personally recommend, and we'd recommend as a company. So do we have any questions? I was promised hundreds of questions. I got callers, right? You could call in and ask a question, actually. If you'd like to call in and ask a question, that number is 617-500-2257.
What are the ways to access a Backbone broadcast again?
Okay,
I don't quite know what that means.
So we talked a little bit about podcasts. Well, that's a podcast RSS feed. We give you that link. You can send that to any of the people that distribute things. The big one being iTunes and Google Play. Those are good. But there's also Stitcher, and there's other things. And you can just, anywhere you can publish it, you can do that. For radio, we will give you a player that's a very open standard HTML5 radio player with your logo that you can use, but you're welcome to go develop your own player. But we can also get you listed with TuneIn, which means you're on every smartphone in the world, and there's millions and tens of millions or more of people that use TuneIn. And we've had a few stations that are on iHeartRadio. The fantasy sports people are. The Boston Herald was when they were on the air, and that is more of a curated. They have to want you, so that's harder to get into. But you have your own player you can put anywhere, in your school website, your business website. So Fantasy Sports developed their own player, put it on their website. They're in iHeartRadio, they're in TuneIn, but all our colleges are in TuneIn. Anybody we start up will automatically get you listed in TuneIn. They don't, at the moment, they're not taking from the internet connections, new stations, but we can get them listed for someone that uses our service.
What kind of bandwidth or throughput is required from the client computer versus mobile phone?
So so I'll break it down by radio. We do 128 kilobits a second, which in today's day and age is not much. When we've started doing this, we still think about modems, so we could do lower data rates. But right now, it's as the internet gets faster, because people want to watch 4K movies, radio becomes super easy. So any good connection, from your studio, the internet that you have, that's a business service where you get some quality of service, is great. You probably don't want to do DSL. Cable modems are not as good as fiber. So the best quality internet is fiber. We were talking about this before the show, Pete and Kelly and Mac and I, about the fact that you've got your own pipe, you've got your own fiber optic pipe to the central office of the phone company, and and you get no contention for that. Whereas in a cable modem, you're sharing with your neighbors. So if there's a lot of people watching movies or doing whatever, you may have some disruption. And it's also, there have been, in fact, I'll tell you the funny story about the radio guy in Boston, Glenn Ordway. He got this beautiful house on the ocean near Boston, South Shore of Boston, and just a great place. Looked over the ocean. Every time there was a storm, salt water would rust his cable modem infrastructure, and so he had to have people from the cable company come out and replace all the connectors every month or so, because they were rusting out and their internet would go out. And eventually he got fiber optic, and and then he was fine, right? Because glass doesn't rust. You can obviously crush it, but it was all buried underground, so it was all fine. So kind of the levels are: fiber's number one, cable modems number two. And we've had people, like I said, I've done broadcasts with wireless pucks, and if the wind's at your back and you have good connection, it's good. But hardwired is the best. Go ahead. If you have
what if you have more than 6 callers?
Phone system. Sorry, I was talking about radio. So radio, 128 kilobits a second. Phones, same thing, 128 kilobits a second. Number of callers does not matter. In the cloud, online, in the hosted computer, in a data center that's taking these calls in individually over a really fat pipe, that's on a multi-gigabit internet connection directly to the backbone. In our software, we take all the calls that are on the air, we mix them down into one feed in the cloud and send that back to you. So you're only getting that one feed of 128 kilobits a second.
So it's what if you have, what I actually meant was, what if you have more than 6 callers calling you?
Oh, they just get a busy signal. And you can configure this for more lines, but 6 tends to be a good one. There's a configuration in the software to set how many lines you have, and just set it on both ends, and then you have more lines.
And if you did it for more than 6 lines, how would the caller screener handle that?
There's just more of these show up. More of these lines show up on the screen.
Oh, you do? Okay, so it could be a scrolling list or something.
Right. So it's really just kind of on a big monitor. We kind of started out as 6. 6 is a pretty sweet number, and but you get a busy signal otherwise when you call in. And
can you have multiple screeners?
Right now you cannot. In the future we will, but right now it's just one screener and one host, and any number of people on Lucy. But you could have different people in different locations that are going to screen calls that are just not doing it at the same time. So if you have people that rotate, so you can't have the same person every day. You can have a pool of people that are going to be your screeners, and this, one day it's Fred, the other day it's Amy.
So what if we had a screener and a host and these 6 lines here? What's the monthly cost for it?
So the phone system, $150 a month. You get 2,500 minutes. You get all the software. You get a number wherever you want, and additional number. We can answer what that is. I don't remember that number off the top of my head. We do initial number that's a sliding scale. We can get you a different number, different place. And typically people do that for a guest line.
More lines, you mean?
Just actually to have second phone numbers. You can have like a guest line that people call in, and we can reserve a line on the interface for the guest to call in. But essentially, you get 2,500 minutes.
That would not be one of the 6 here. The person that's calling you to be interviewed.
Right. There'd be one reserve that you'd cut it down by 1, and then that guest line would ring in. That way, if your calls are ringing off the hook, we do have a few people that they're just full lines all the time, and they use that feature. Right?
And the cost, where is all the information on the callers stored? In your server?
It's stored in our server, right? So that's maintained by us, and we have it all backed up, et cetera. So that just comes in when you need it. It's all there.
Right.
Right. And then if you want to do the Lucy software, that is $275 a month. That's Lucy with Backbone CoHost. And CoHost is the ability just to be able to do that and bring in Comrexes and things like that. And Lucy is the Lucy Global app. That's $275 a month, but that's unlimited number of people you can give it to, unlimited number of hours. You could have just things that are running, you could have 6 or 7 people that are 24 hours a day on, and it's not going to cost you a penny more for that time.
And the screener and the host can be on opposite sides of the world. It doesn't matter, right?
Absolutely. Like I said, I did this from
internet.
England. I did this personally from England. It was just fantastic. And, obviously the further you are, if you're in Australia and I'm in London, there's going to be some latency just because you're going around the earth.
Not much.
Not much. But, across the U.S. is about 30 milliseconds, which is 30, 10,000ths of a second, right? And, around the world is probably 200 or 300. So now you're getting up to, a fraction of a second. There may be something noticeable, but it's not much. But
even phone calls around the world are going to have basically the same latency.
Right.
And
we're just dealing with the speed of light.
They're not so much that they interfere with conversation.
Correct. And that you're just dealing with Einstein, nothing to do with Backbone, right? It's just
Right.
the speed of light is the fastest you can go. And data does not travel at the speed of light, travels at the speed of whatever the network connection is. So how many hops it goes through, et cetera. So, we've tuned things for people at times when they've been a long way to make sure they go the minimum number of hops, et cetera.
Oh, if they were taking international calls and stuff like that, you mean, or?
Right, exactly. So
it's a regular phone to where's your actual central office where these calls come into?
It really we can so we work with data centers around the world, so we can put one if you're in the UK, for example, a Daily Mail, their servers are in the UK.
Right.
Stations on the West Coast, it's in the Golden State Warriors. Their stuff is all on the West Coast and in California. Many people are in the East Coast people, they're all in Virginia. We can put people in Chicago, et cetera. So there's multiple data centers where you can do that. But in the US, it tends to be, pretty good no matter what, because the distance, 3,000 miles is not that much for the speed of light. You're talking a few milliseconds. But, we tend to try to make it as minimal as we can because we're engineers and we care, right? We care that it's going to be a good quality experience. So like your friend doesn't want to be technical. We make it so they can be not technical. That's our service.
Does the dial button mean a dial pop-up?
I can call out. I can just go call out.
Pops up.
Yep, I can go call out as a screener. I can type in a phone number and I can put a name in this.
And that phone number is remembered, so I can do a pull-down menu of all the people I phoned.
They get remembered, correct? And then it's pretty simple. Just pretty simple.
Yeah.
And so to get back to your question about audio, so the other thing we talked about, which is feeding stuff to terrestrial, that requires no bandwidth from your remote studio location. That's all done from the server hosted, which is again on a big fat internet pipe. And it is pretty clear and sweet situation. There's not a lot you can worry about. And of course, for the radio side of it, we work with different CDNs and we can scale you up to do tens of thousands of people if you need it, or a few hundred or a few thousand. So you don't have to worry about that. And that's not coming out of your home network either. That's all in the cloud as well, all online.
What's the codec?
So we use AAC, but we do AAC and MP3 as a rule at 128 kilobits a second, and there's both 44 kilohertz audio. So it sounds very clean and very good.
But the Lucy is?
The Lucy is better quality. The Lucy is 48 kilohertz Opus. So it is,
right.
and you'd be hard pressed to notice the difference, but because we can do it at a low latency and a low bandwidth, we choose to do the higher quality just because we start out with, you're going to recompress it. There's a generation loss. For people that remember analog tape, when you had multi-track recordings, when you ping pong recordings together, you have a generation loss. When you recompress digital audio, there is a generation loss. And so we want to minimize that as much. The better quality you start out with, the better you can go.
Within the phone software, this software, is there a recording capability, or is that in other software?
It's another software. So we've been talking about phones, but we can actually also talk about radio. Let's see if I can bring up a radio client for you. And this is, I showed a slide of this earlier. This is actually the station I do for the point of things. And we're just rerunning a single show, but there could be in the example I showed earlier, you could essentially have a playlist of 50 items or whatever. And there's a whole scheduling interface for this as well, that you can set things to be there. There's two types of playlists that go into the automation. One is floating. So that means when there's nothing scheduled, you'll play one of these playlists. Okay. And the other thing is scheduled for a time. So you can repeat a show, a specific set of things at a certain time or a certain genre of music, et cetera. And that's up to you. So we have some customers that we have an online magazine called Times, and they literally program every hour of the day of the 7 days with different shows and different sweepers and all that. So they have hundreds of playlists that are that are in there, and that all goes to plan. But other people, colleges sometimes just have a couple of things that float, or they're repeating some shows, and you can do things very compactly. You don't have to do a lot of programming. And the nice thing about our software is that, for example, this, if you can see this, it says in the first column ROT. That doesn't mean the show is rotten. It means it's doing rotation. So it's going to randomly pick a show from a category. In this case, it's the podcast type. So this is, again, using Backbone Hub and Backbone Radio and Backbone Talk, right?
Can you expand that window to make it bigger?
You can make that wider, but the text wouldn't get any bigger. So, it doesn't really do us much good to do that. But anyway, so it actually just switched to something else. The show ended and we went to something else that's in rotation.
And what about rights for the music you play?
So that's a totally separate thing, which has nothing to do with software. So we for college radio, it's actually a very simple rights mechanism where there's a nonprofit rate that's $600 a year. You can play anything you want. You have to be under 157,000 hours a month. So that's pretty simple. For commercial, terrestrial broadcasters have something carved out for them, but also if you're just someone that wants to play music, then you do have to either have the rights to the music or you have to do a license with Sound Exchange, which can get pricey if you have an audience. So that is one of the reasons we pivoted to talk radio, because we found the music rights were expensive.
So you don't manage that at all?
We don't manage that.
Do that. Right.
However, we can generate the statistics for you for the reporting if you need to, but we let you do that because it's really your content, and you control it, and we don't want to have to. And it's a lot of paperwork to do, to be honest. We'd have to have a whole team of people do that. We're technology people. We're not clerical, right? But we know how to talk to, and we know we can tell you what to do to go get those rights and make it as easy as possible to manage it. It just costs you something. But the colleges are easy. And if you notice, the terrestrial people that I've been talking about, the Golden State Warriors, the Daily Mail, the Boston Herald, Fantasy Sports, those are all talk, and they own that content.
So how does the phone software feed into the radio station software?
So pretty simple. Let's say I had a piece of hardware that was there are competitors to us that are a physical piece of hardware. You wire phone lines, and that would just be a line into your mixing board with that audio through a hybrid, right? And you'd get your audio would play into your mixer, and you'd put it in the mix. This is exactly the same way. I just output this into this mixing board. I have it on a fader, and I bring up that fader, and those are my calls. I can mute it. I can do whatever. It's just audio. So that's how it integrates. So, and this is again, I'm using this with the Roadcaster, and I'm listening to the multi-track channel, which is all the channels mixed together. As you can see, my audio is there. And when I have a little checkbox here, and if you can read that, it says record live to disk. Whenever I go live, I get a live recording file that I can now cut up and edit, or I can upload it. In some cases, we'll do, for example, Fantasy Sports. We just record on server side every hour of every day, and they have a small crew of production people who are downloading those files, cutting commercials out, putting commercials in, putting sweepers on them, bumpers, putting them out as podcasts, or putting them into the cloud to repeat. So that they will typically not use the automation schedule. They use that just for an evergreen backup, because their stuff is very perishable. What's going on in the games tonight? Right?
What is evergreen?
So evergreen is things that would sound good, if you don't have something scheduled to play. So it's generic programming. For example, they have a show about baseball cards, and talking about the history of that. So that's something you could play at any time. It's probably not as topical as what's going on in the playoffs or in tonight's games and what's the line for your fantasy football team, etc. But it's something, if you have nothing else playing, that we can back up to. For example, there's been power outages in New York on occasion, and they've gone off the air, and the Evergreen is filled in while they're there. But mainly, 99.9% of the time, they will take a raft of about 12 hours worth of, or maybe sometimes less, because they're on about 18 hours a day. So, do the math. There's like 4 or 5 hours they're not there live. And they'll set up maybe 4 or 5, 6 hours of stuff. They play it manually through, and by the time someone comes in the morning, that ends, and then they go back to live. But
so does this take over when audio is lost, or is it a manual
Correct.
switch over?
So if you disconnect this, if we went live on this station right now, as soon as we disconnected, we'd go back to something else. We go back to whatever else is in the schedule, and it would take over. So this kind of a built-in fail-safe.
Where would that come from?
So that's living in the cloud. So I'll give you an example of a college. We have Fisk University in Nashville, and about maybe 2 months ago, they had a tornado come through, and it knocked out the power. Thankfully, no one was hurt at the college. There were some people killed in Nashville and injured, but it took out the power at the college for about a week and a half, and we're right back to the cloud. And they had some Evergreen. They're a jazz station, so we had some Evergreen jazz that they're playing, and that just played until they got their power back, and there was enough content in there that it sounded okay. It was obviously they didn't have the news and all that stuff, but they're back on now. So, but that filled in. So as soon as that disconnected, we're right to that cloud programming. So that is the advantage of having a online service. And by the way, when I say cloud, I'm talking about real computers in a real data center, real physical area, not virtual. I'm not a believer for broadcast in virtual servers, because they tend to, you've all heard stories about how even Amazon's cloud has gone down at times. They're getting better at this, but for this kind of thing, especially for phones, it's real time, and it needs to be as low latency as possible. You don't want to add in anything else. And so we do it with real physical machines, but with all the advantages of being online in the cloud, where there's someone maintaining it for you. But it's your box. It's a piece of a box that's yours, and you run it. So to continue with your question about bandwidth, so we already covered.
Yeah.
We heard phones, there's one feed in and out, 120 kilobits a second. Radio is one feed out, 120 kilobit a second. And by the way, that is only when you're live. All your listeners are taken from the content delivery network that's to whatever number you want. Again, that uses no bandwidth on your network. So by the way, we're very popular with colleges because they don't have to open their firewalls coming in. There's no incoming traffic that's not routed from the source. So we're opening the connection. The phones are opening the connection to the cloud. The radio is opening the connection to the cloud, etc. So that's that's nicely manageable by school IT people or any business IT people. The internet is this great place where there's all sorts of connectivity, and you can get. It's really kind of a golden age, don't you think, for information that you can offer. Let's talk about music. You can hear any song you want for the most part with a moment's notice. You don't have to go and buy it or wait till it plays on a radio station as you did many years ago. You can just summon from your smart speaker to play a song, and it's there. Well, the cost of that is security, because there's lots of things that are holes, and there are people after your money or want to do some damage or use your computer to mine bitcoins or to ransomware you or something. So IT departments tend to be very conservative about what traffic they let in, and they love us because all the traffic's from inside out. They don't have to do anything special. It's things they already allow.
Well, I think we pretty much covered it all. It's a really fascinating system, and I am the person I tried to sell it to years and years ago was traveling, so she couldn't log on to listen to it. But I'm going to make sure she listens to the video, and which of course we all know there's a video of this show, like everybody knows.
Right.
And we'll see what can happen. Maybe I can talk her into it, but maybe now that I'm not doing any work, maybe I should just go and be your engineer.
You could. Well, and I'll tell you in general, we tend to be, so we differentiate ourselves from many other companies that we have pretty personalized service. You can talk to me or someone that's just like
Sure.
me that to help you get set up and get organized. And we do that for anyone. We'll do it for your friend, and we'll do it for anyone that comes in as a new customer. And we tend to. That's why we've been able to go do further things with the NBA summer leagues because
Yeah.
we've been so supportive for Golden State. They want to do other things with us. We have a number of
Sure.
people that really enjoy that. We work with a lot of producers that'll bring in multiple people. So I mentioned Goss's Garage earlier on. That's the same guy that does a chiropractor named Dr. Berg
Right.
that gets thousands of phone calls every hour. It's pretty amazing. It does a 1-hour show as part of a YouTube channel. So a lot of people are using our phones to do call-ins as part of a video like this. We took calls as part of this broadcast, etc. Right. So and you can do that. So we're happy to provide you with a very personalized service getting set up and help you get through those bits and bytes, and you're not going to feel alone on that.
Well, I certainly could become her call screener at the very least, and then be your
That sounds
engineer,
good.
just from home, like or from wherever,
Absolutely. You absolutely could. Absolutely could. And like I said, once you get this set up, I mean, for someone like her, I'd recommend a mixer like the Rodecaster, which is very simple. And
Yeah,
you get that set up
no
once.
knobs, just one set of knobs. That's
Just
it.
one set
Right.
of knobs and pretty straightforward. And I'm sure she could master that. And then
Maybe we can
everything
get
is ready to go.
the basic model with just one knob.
The one knob version. We could
And
take
then
the other
one
ones
knob
off.
doesn't actually do anything.
Just a lot of duct
But-
tape, a lot of
Exactly,
gaffer's tape, just covered all over.
Exactly. Worked for me. Exactly.
Yeah, this is I think this will be I can get my radio station going now, George. This is
We're ready for you, Kelly,
this
whenever
is
you
the
want.
answer to my solution, my problem, I mean, and I keep thinking about all the unconventional applications because that's what we're really good at is taking what people never intended to use their product for and then go, you know what, we're going to use it for this and we're going to need a little support.
Hot air ballooning. It's great for that.
There
Lucy,
you go.
right?
Now, this whole idea of bringing, one of my first things that hit me was backup to a lot of these shows that are going on. When you have remote, we just had an issue last week where couldn't get our presenter, had terrible issues getting through a firewall, right? And now granted, we have some flexibility and we were like, okay, well, we'll just do that on a different day. But imagine if we were doing a show for a client that that information had to be delivered no matter what. Or what's our backup plan when we don't send out more video? Or more importantly, how do I bring in outside attendees that can't travel in and video's not practical? I mean, the list kind of goes on and on there, and your products are those kind of things that I think I would encourage everybody who's watching these videos to go out. You may not have an application right now, but I have a little notebook that I keep in my computer, a list of just these kind of very products that when somebody goes, hey, I want to try this, I go and I start thinking through and I go back through that list of things I saw and said, you know what, this isn't exactly that, but you know what, this is going to work perfect. And I'm not putting on a radio show, but I am bringing a lot of outside people in to participate in a single point, right?
Correct.
So those are just, I would encourage everybody to think differently. We're in a world right now of thinking differently. And I am confident that a year from now, we'll look at Backbone products and see stuff that we never imagined.
It's already happening.
There you go.
We'll be on our 200th show by then.
You will.
Yeah, well, let's hope that at least 1 or 2 episodes of those are from actual show site.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has all gone to plan, and we had no technical difficulties, and all the radio software worked perfectly as it usually does. So I think we're very successful. But if you're ever in a situation where you have someone that can't get through on video, they can certainly bring up their cell phone with Lucy Global and sound terrific. And as you said, there may be some video fatigue going on right now with Zoom, and a lot of times, so I'll leave you one thought is that I'm not a big believer in radio stations doing live video feeds from the studio because you see the guy, doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like we do.
He's
Yeah,
staring at his notes, and his glasses aren't quite right, and it kind of destroys
right.
the illusion of radio, which is that
They're
you know
focused on you
wonderful
solely, the
place.
caller, right?
Exactly correct. So this may be a good tactic for you to bring in some people to just have them be on audio, and you just put up a picture, like they did back in
Mhm.
like the Gulf War, right? They just put up a picture of the guy, right, who was on a phone, but just
How
put a picture
brilliant
up
is
on,
that?
right? That still
Something
works.
just occurred to me. Lucy Global, because its data can give you a really good feed in a crowded stadium where you would not be able to make a phone call.
Well, so there's a double-edged sword to that. So you'd be correct, except if it's doing 4G, when you've got all those people in the studio, in the stadium that are on their phones, suddenly that 4G connection is shared with all of them, and it tends to not be as good. So the way to do
Well,
that in a crowded stadium is to have a private Wi-Fi that you have access to from the stadium, and then you're fine.
I've done Unity Intercom, which uses the data channel of a regular phone line in a crowded stadium or at New Year's Eve or at Times Square or at Macy's, and had absolutely no problem.
Well, and it really
connection.
depends. It really depends on the situation. So yeah, but our experience has been that it's better to have a private connection of a Wi-Fi to do that. But it has been like Summer League, we did 4G and we had no problems, or we did the Wi-Fi in the building, no problems. So yes, but you're
Interesting.
again.
We'll have to investigate why that Unity works so well, because they're known for it working in the middle of the biggest crowds with no problem
Right.
whatsoever.
Well, we can
Where
certainly
you can't use
compensate.
Wi-Fi.
We can
Where you
compensate.
can't use Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we can compensate by adding in maybe a little bit of latency and or some error correction. But
Yeah.
you're just still better off if you get your own private connection. Just kind of like anything else, having your own line to do it.
Yeah.
It's hard to beat. So George, thank you so much for bringing
Thank you.
this in, and I
Thanks
look
for having
forward
me.
to continuing our conversations. And next year, hopefully, when NAB may not be virtual,
We'll all be there together.
exactly, and it's going to be like old home week,
It
and
will.
we'll get to
do a
meet
broadcast.
everybody.
We could do a broadcast from our booth in NAB. I'd be happy to have you. We could do
There
I
you
don't
go.
think so. I think next year's NAB will be on Zoom with a million little boxes that we
How do
walk
I
around.
Oh my God! You know what, George? I need your software because I need to be able to dump Peter as soon as possible.
Yeah, he's already blacklisted. No, you're blacklisted, not Peter. We'll blacklist Peter
Come on,
too.
I'm
You just
blacklisted.
dump
This
him
is
anytime you want.
I'm telling you, but thanks again for this.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everybody for joining us today. Reach out to Backbone. Think differently. These times call
my
for
contact info is on there. You can send me an email and let me know what you think. And actually, let's see. I got one more slide actually at the end here. Let's go to that.
up.
We'll bring that up. Where to go? Let's get on that. We were all pretty
Well, we've
smoother
got
to
our
jump
slide.
out, but
We've got our
there it is.
questions. We
There's
got
my
questions.
contact
There we go.
info.
There
You
it
can
is.
follow
Yeah.
me on Twitter at G Capalbo. Here's my mobile number. Give me a call if you have a question. I'm happy to take calls. If I'm not awake, I won't answer it, but I'll usually answer it. And then check out our website at backbone.com if you want to see more stuff about our products. And that's all in the handout materials as well. This info.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've learned is that hey Pete, can you unshare your screen for just a second so we can pull that? There we go. I think one of the things we've learned through this whole webinar experience is that the value of the contact information.
Right.
Just everybody out in the field, you have access to an incredible resource, and that is the product experts, the subject matter experts on any of these given things. So those things, take a screenshot, put those in your phone, folks, and when you come up with some ideas that you think it may or may not work, reach out to George. It's really simple.
I'm happy to listen. I enjoy that kind of stuff. I
Exactly.
think the hot air balloon radio seems like a great concept we just invented. So the hot air
You
balloon
know what?
company out
I'm
there
not
that like to
opposed
do
to
that.
that.
Right. Yeah.
Float away. So
Right.
anyhow, have a great evening, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. What do we got tomorrow, Pete? We have dinner with Pete tomorrow, by the way, in case anybody's got nothing going on. Pete's buying dinner, although it's at 4 p.m. Eastern, so you may want to, just grab a good drink.
It's an early dinner.
Exactly. He came up with this 15 steps for programming Riedel. I would suggest everybody dial
He has some
in.
friends at Riedel, so that's a
There
good
you
that's
go.
a good topic.
You know, so Pete's buying probably a few cocktails.
And a major part of what I'm going to be showing is how to save those favorite things in your Riedel program that are not savable. Like
okay.
like your logic diagrams and your marker settings and your panel settings. I now have a way to save those in a file so you can import them into any Riedel show.
Okay, so the new title for tomorrow night is Saving the Unsavable. Is that what we're saying?
Sort of, yes.
Sort of. Okay. I'm just making promises that you are not able to commit to, and that's awesome to me. You know, I'm writing checks.
That seems like a topic beyond Riedel to me, but I don't know.
That
But
one may
Riedel will
go
work.
way bigger
Yeah.
than that. But
Right. Go way
we
big.
anyhow, thanks everybody. Have a great night
you.
and so long.
So long.
Bye-bye.
Bye.